The day Earth's battleship arrived in the Zenari system, the entire galaxy held its breath. The Galactic Union had always dismissed humanity as a minor species, a backwater race from the Sol system that barely had a seat at the interstellar table. To them, humans were insignificant, useful as mercenaries, laborers, or traders, but not a real power. Certainly not a threat. That changed when the Behemoth arrived. The battleship was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It was not sleek like the elegant warships of the Elvery, nor did it have the organic, flowing architecture of the Zith. No, the Behemoth was brutal in design. Sharp edges, thick plating, and weapon mounts bristling across its hull. It radiated power, not grace. And it wasn't alone. Flanking it were two smaller vessels, the Revenant and the Titan's Fist, each one more menacing than any warship the Union had ever encountered. They came in response to the massacre at Proxima Centauri. The Drath Collective, an insectoid race that ruled half the known galaxy, had made a fatal mistake. They had destroyed a human colony, assuming Earth would bow down like so many other races before them. The Drath thought humanity would beg for mercy. Instead, they got the Behemoth. The Galactic Union's diplomats scrambled for answers. They sent frantic messages to their allies, urging them to prepare for what was coming. The Drath, however, laughed. To them, humans were nothing but pests, a minor inconvenience. They gathered their fleets, ready to swat away whatever Earth dared to throw at them. And then the Behemoth opened fire. The first volley shattered the lead Drath battleship in an instant. Their shields, which had withstood centuries of war against lesser races, crumpled like paper under the sheer force of human weaponry. The Union watched in horror as humanity demonstrated something no one had believed possible: true technological supremacy. Plasma cannons burned through hulls. Kinetic rounds the size of city buses punched through enemy formations like they were made of glass. Railguns, moving projectiles at nearly the speed of light, shredded entire fleets before they could even react. The Drath screamed for reinforcements. They sent hundreds of warships to stop the human onslaught. It didn't matter. Earth had been underestimated for centuries. They had watched the galaxy, studied its technology, and learned its weaknesses. And when the time came, they didn't just catch up. They surpassed every major power in one brutal, terrifying moment. The Galactic Union panicked. If humanity could do this to the Drath, what could they do to the rest of them? Then came the final transmission from the Behemoth. A simple message, broadcast to every world in the Union. Earth does not forget. Earth does not forgive. Stay out of our way. And just like that, the galaxy cowered in horror. The wreckage of the Drath fleet still drifted through the void, glowing embers of shattered warships casting eerie shadows against the backdrop of the stars. The battle had lasted less than an hour, but its impact would be felt for centuries. The Galactic Union's High Council, a collection of the most powerful species in the known universe, sat in stunned silence. The footage of the Behemoth's assault played on a massive holoscreen in the center of the Grand Chamber. Not one of them had expected this. Ambassador Jular of the Elvari, a tall, silver-skinned diplomat whose race had dominated the galaxy's politics for millennia, was the first to speak. "We have miscalculated," he admitted, his usual calm replaced by unease. Humanity was not what we believed. The insectoid Kthari delegate, clicking its mandibles nervously, chittered in response. They destroyed an entire battle group. The Drath had nearly 100 warships, and the humans— "3," interrupted Grand Marshal Sorak of the Thalkesh, his feline features tense. "They only needed 3. A hush fell over the council. Humanity had never been taken seriously as a military force. Their fleets were assumed to be outdated, weak, barely capable of holding their own, And yet, here they were, standing atop the ruins of one of the most feared empires in the galaxy. But it wasn't just their victory that terrified the Council. It was the way they fought. Other species had long since abandoned kinetic weaponry in favor of energy-based combat. The humans, however, had perfected both. Their ships fired slugs of hyper-dense metal at relativistic speeds, tearing through shields that should have been impenetrable. They didn't just disable enemy ships. They annihilated them, reducing them to drifting debris in seconds. They did not come for negotiations, the Zith representative murmured, its gelatinous form quivering. They did not ask for reparations. They did not even issue a formal declaration of war. No, Jular agreed grimly. They came for vengeance. At that moment, a new transmission arrived. The Union's high command expected a demand, perhaps a threat. What they received was a cold, precise statement. We will not seek war with the Union. We will not expand beyond our borders. But if any of you so much as touch another human world, we will do to your fleets what we did to the Drath. A moment of heavy silence followed. Then, the feed cut out. The message was clear. The humans weren't claiming territory. They weren't demanding tribute. They weren't seeking allies. They had come to prove a point. And they had done it so thoroughly that every government in the galaxy now whispered one terrifying thought. What if the humans decide they want more? The Drath Collective was finished. Their homeworld, once a fortress planet teeming with their kind, now sat in eerie silence. Not because humanity had destroyed it. No, the behemoth had left Drath Prime untouched. But the message had been received loud and clear. The Drath survivors had surrendered before humanity ever reached their system. Their ruling council had scattered, fleeing to the farthest corners of the galaxy. Their military, once a symbol of conquest and terror, had been reduced to wreckage floating in the void. The few warships they had left refused to engage. Some even defected, offering themselves to other empires just to avoid the wrath of Earth's forces. But the galaxy's fear didn't stem from the destruction of the Drath alone. It was how the humans had done it. Every species had heard the stories, wars lasting decades, fleets clashing in prolonged battles, entire campaigns waged over small stretches of space. But humans had ended an empire in a matter of hours. They hadn't fought a war. They had executed a sentence. And now, the question every ruler, every strategist, every admiral was asking was simple. What else were the humans hiding? The Galactic Union scrambled to understand the extent of Earth's military capabilities. They scoured their intelligence reports, sent spies, bribed traitors, even begged human diplomats for insight. But no answer came. And that was what terrified them the most, because the humans hadn't even mobilized their full fleet. The behemoth and its escorts were just a fraction of Earth's power. The real fleet? No one knew where it was, how many ships it contained, or what weapons it carried. For the first time in history, the galaxy wasn't afraid of an empire trying to conquer it. They were afraid of an empire that had no interest in conquest, an empire that only acted when provoked, but when it did, left nothing behind. The Elvari Confederation, once one of humanity's biggest critics, quietly withdrew their patrols from human borders. The Kthari, who had once enslaved human prisoners of war, suddenly abolished all forced labor programs. And the Zith, who prided themselves on their neutrality, refused to speak on the matter at all. Even the Galactic Union's ruling body, usually so quick to pass sanctions and dictate the course of interstellar politics, did nothing, because deep down, they all knew the truth. If humanity ever decided to truly go to war, nothing in the galaxy could stop them. The silence following humanity's display of power stretched across the stars. No species dared to provoke them, and for the first time in galactic history, a single force had become untouchable. Even the most war-hardened empires, those who had once laughed at the idea of human supremacy, now whispered in hushed voices about the behemoth. But while the galaxy cowered, humanity was not idle. Deep within the Sol system, Earth's true military command convened in a classified orbital station hidden behind Jupiter's shadow. Unlike the panic-ridden councils of the Galactic Union, the men and women seated around the war table were eerily calm. They had expected this outcome. Admiral Jonathan Hayes, the architect of humanity's modern war doctrine, leaned forward. His voice, though level, carried the weight of what had just transpired. "The Union is afraid," he said simply, his steel-gray eyes scanning the room. That was the point. Around him sat the minds responsible for Earth's dominance: generals, strategists, scientists. Not a single one of them was celebrating. There were no toasts, no boasts of victory. Humanity had won a battle, but their true war had only just begun. A woman with sharp features and a data slate in her hand cleared her throat. "The Drath are shattered. Their economy will collapse in a matter of months. Reports indicate that smaller factions are already carving up their remains." Hayes nodded. That was expected. The moment the Drath showed weakness, the vultures of the galaxy would descend upon them. It was how power worked out here. Another officer, a younger man with dark skin and a cybernetic eye, spoke next. "The Union hasn't made a move against us, but we've intercepted transmissions between the Elvery and the Zith. They're running simulations, testing out hypothetical conflicts with Earth." A smirk crossed Hayes's face. "And?" The officer hesitated, then exhaled. "None of their models show them winning." A chuckle rippled through the room, but it wasn't one of amusement. It was the kind of laugh shared between soldiers who knew a terrible truth. Hayes leaned back, interlacing his fingers. "Then we proceed as planned." The woman across from him narrowed her eyes. "You think they'll still test us?" "They always do," he said. "Fear doesn't last forever. Eventually, someone will get brave. They'll think we got lucky against the Drath, that we don't have the numbers to fight a prolonged war, that they can unite against us. And when they do?" Hayes's smirk faded. His voice was cold, certain. "We remind them why the galaxy should be afraid." The room fell silent. There was no bloodlust in their expressions, no cruelty in their words. But there was certainty. The galaxy had made the mistake of underestimating humanity once. They wouldn't get a second chance. The days following the destruction of the Drath fleet sent ripples through the galactic community. Every major empire, every ruling council, and every warlord in the known systems was left with the same thought. What have we done? For centuries, humanity had been treated as little more than an afterthought. A species confined to its small sector of space, scrapping for resources, barely keeping up with the great powers of the universe. They had been useful, sure, hired as mercenaries, traders, explorers, but no one had ever truly feared them. Not until now. And yet, fear alone was not enough to keep the galaxy at bay forever. Admiral Jonathan Hayes knew this better than anyone. Sitting in the command center of Earth's secretive black station, he watched as dozens of intelligence reports scrolled past his screen. The Galactic Union was rattled, but rattled did not mean defeated. It meant they were thinking. It meant they were planning, and eventually, it meant they would act. The war against the Drath had not been a war. It had been an execution. But the next war? The one that Hayes knew was inevitable? That one would be different. "Sir," a voice interrupted his thoughts. Commander Elise Carter stood at attention, her expression grim. "We've detected an increase in fleet movements along our borders." Hayes exhaled slowly. Which factions? The Elvari Confederation and the Zith Dominion are reinforcing their defensive lines. We've also intercepted a Union-wide transmission. Carter tapped on her holopad, and the message appeared before them. A grainy recording of High Chancellor Orlan, one of the most powerful political figures in the galaxy, flickered to life. The reptilian leader's voice was measured but heavy with tension. The events at Proxima Centauri have shown us a terrifying truth. Humanity possesses weapons beyond anything we have prepared for. Their fleet, once dismissed as primitive, is capable of annihilation on an unprecedented scale. We must not allow ourselves to be divided by fear. We must stand together. We must find a way to ensure that such a force is never again unleashed upon the galaxy. Hayes snorted. They're uniting against us. Carter nodded. It's only a matter of time before they attempt something. They're scared, Hayes said, but fear breeds desperation. They won't sit idle forever. They'll try to learn our secrets, infiltrate our systems, maybe even launch a preemptive strike. We're monitoring all possible incursions, Carter assured him. No ships have crossed into our space, yet. Hayes stood, walking over to the massive viewport overlooking Jupiter's stormy expanse. Black Station wasn't visible to the naked eye. It was hidden deep within the planet's radiation belt, undetectable to any known sensor technology. It was the beating heart of humanity's war machine, the place where their most dangerous projects were developed in secrecy. What about our own movements? He asked. Carter hesitated. Fleet Command is holding the behemoth back at Titan Station, awaiting further orders. But... She glanced at him. Sir, with respect, the Union won't stay defensive forever. They're building alliances as we speak. If they come for us, they'll do it together. Hayes turned back to her, his expression unreadable. Then we'll need to make sure they never come for us. Carter frowned. Are you suggesting a first strike? No, Hayes said. Not yet. But we need to show them that fear is the correct response, that there is no winning against us. We don't start wars, Carter. He exhaled. We end them before they begin. Carter didn't respond immediately, but the weight of his words hung between them. The galaxy was on edge, waiting to see if humanity would make another move. And that was exactly where Hayes wanted them. Begin deployment of Ghost Fleet Protocol, he ordered. Let's remind the galaxy that no matter where they hide, no matter how many alliances they forge. He turned back to the viewport, watching Jupiter's storms rage below. Humanity is always watching. The first step of Earth's true war had begun. The stars belonged to humanity now. Not in the way the Galactic Union had once claimed dominion over the galaxy, ruling through treaties and trade agreements. No, humanity's rule was far more terrifying. It was silent, unchallenged, a presence that loomed over every empire, unseen yet undeniable. And Admiral Jonathan Hayes intended to keep it that way. Deep within Black Station, hidden beyond Jupiter's radiation storms, the command center hummed with quiet activity. Officers worked in focused silence, processing intelligence reports, monitoring fleet movements, and ensuring that humanity's watchful eye never blinked. Commander Elise Carter approached Hayes with a grim expression. Sir, the Union has begun mobilizing. Surveillance drones have picked up large-scale fleet exercises near Elvari space. Hayes barely reacted. How many ships? At least 300, she replied. Mostly Elvari, but there are Zith warships among them. They're training together, simulating large-scale engagements. She hesitated before adding, their simulations focus on countering the behemoth. Hayes exhaled slowly. Predictable. It had been inevitable. Fear was a powerful motivator, but it only lasted so long. Eventually, paranoia set in. The Union knew they couldn't allow humanity to exist as an unchecked power. They would try to find weaknesses, develop countermeasures, and, when they believed they were ready, they would strike. They would do exactly what Hayes had predicted. "Any indication they're planning to move on us soon?" he asked. Carter shook her head. "Not yet. Right now they're just preparing. But the fact that the Elvari and Zith are working together, that's unprecedented. It means they're serious." Hayes stared at the galactic map hovering in front of them, red markers highlighting known fleet movements. He could already see the pieces shifting into place. The Union wanted a war. They just didn't realize they had already lost. He turned to Carter. "Activate Ghost Fleet Protocol. I want silent incursions into their systems. No attacks, no engagements, just surveillance. We're going to know everything before they make their move." She nodded. "I'll have the stealth ships deployed immediately." Hayes clasped his hands behind his back. "And bring the behemoth to the Kepler defense line. No direct confrontations, but I want them to see it. Let them know it's waiting for them." Carter smirked. "You want them to hesitate?" "I want them to understand," Hayes corrected. "Before they even think about war, they need to feel the weight of what they're considering." He leaned in, his voice quiet but firm. "Because when we strike, it won't be a war." His eyes, cold as the void, met hers. "It'll be an extinction." Across the galaxy, in the heart of the Elvari Confederation, High Chancellor Orlan sat in his private chamber, watching the latest intelligence reports with growing unease. The footage showed a lone battleship, a human warship, floating along the border of Union space. The behemoth. It hadn't moved. It hadn't fired a shot. But it was there, like a predator watching its prey. Orlan turned to his military advisors. "Tell me," he said carefully, "do we have any weapon capable of matching that ship?" Silence. The gathered officers exchanged nervous glances, none wanting to be the first to speak. Finally, a 10th admiral cleared his throat. "No," he admitted. "We don't." Orlan felt a chill run down his spine. He had hoped for a different answer. Hoped in vain. Because no matter how much they trained, no matter how many ships they built, the truth remained. Humanity was already at war with them. The Union just hadn't realized it yet. The moment the behemoth appeared along the Kepler defense line, the Galactic Union froze. Messages flooded through encrypted channels. High-ranking officials whispered in darkened chambers, and military analysts scrambled to determine what it meant. The battleship had not crossed into Union space. It had not fired a shot. It simply existed. And yet, that alone was enough to bring the galaxy to the brink of panic. In the Elvari High Council, Chancellor Orlan stood before a holographic display, his gaze locked on the massive warship floating in the void. Even from millions of kilometers away, its presence was suffocating. An aide leaned in, voice hushed with barely concealed terror. "Sir, our forces remain on high alert. We've positioned 3 fleets along the sector border, but—" He hesitated. "But what?" Orlan snapped. The aide swallowed hard. "We have no idea what's inside that ship. We don't even know the extent of human technology." That was the problem, wasn't it? Humanity had revealed only what they wanted the galaxy to see. They had unleashed the behemoth against the Drath, yes. But what if that was just a distraction? What if their true weapons, their true warships, were hidden somewhere beyond the reaches of known space, waiting for the right moment to strike? Orlan turned to his military advisors. "Tell me we have something, some countermeasure." A Zith strategist clicked his mandibles. "We've been running combat simulations against the behemoth. Every scenario ends in catastrophic loss." The room fell into silence. Orlan clenched his fists. He had been prepared for war, but not this kind of war. Not one where his people were already outmatched before the first shot was even fired. We cannot allow ourselves to be paralyzed by fear, he said finally. The humans have power, yes, but they do not rule us. If they think they can intimidate the Union into submission, they are mistaken. One of the Elvari generals stepped forward. Do you propose an attack, Chancellor? Orlan hesitated. That was the question, wasn't it? Strike first or wait for the inevitable. Either choice carried its own kind of death sentence. No, he said at last. Not yet. But we will prepare. Across the galaxy, preparations for war began. Meanwhile, aboard the Behemoth, Admiral Jonathan Hayes stood on the bridge, watching the distant Union fleets through the viewport. They were gathering like insects, their ships tiny specks in the darkness, bristling with weapons yet afraid to come closer. Good. Commander Elise Carter approached him, datapad in hand. Union forces are holding position. No aggressive movements. They're afraid, Hayes said simply. She hesitated. But fear won't last forever. No, he admitted. It won't. That was why Ghost Fleet protocol had already begun. Scattered throughout the Union's territories, unseen by their sensors, humanity's true power was already at work. Advanced stealth ships, cloaked beyond detection, were infiltrating their systems, listening, watching, mapping out every weakness. The moment the Union made their move, they wouldn't be fighting the Behemoth. They wouldn't even be fighting the full force of Earth's fleet. They would be fighting an enemy that already knew their plans, an enemy that had already won. Hayes turned to Carter. Deploy the next phase. The Union thinks they still have a chance. A slow smile crossed his face. Let's show them how wrong they are. In the cold depths of space, where light barely reached and silence reigned, Ghost Fleet protocol was in motion. No one in the Galactic Union saw them, no sensors detected their approach, no alarms sounded as humanity's hidden fleet moved like shadows through the void. They were not here to attack. Not yet. They were here to prepare the battlefield before the war even began. Aboard the Union's Central Defense Station, Xeraxis Prime High Chancellor Orlan sat in his war room, surrounded by his top generals and admirals. A massive holographic display flickered before them, outlining known human fleet movements, or at least what they thought were human fleet movements. The Behemoth remains stationed near Kepler, an Elvari strategist reported. Additional human warships have been detected at their core systems, but there's no indication of a full mobilization. The Zith Admiral, his mandibles clicking in agitation, interjected. And that is precisely what concerns me. We have no evidence of a grand fleet, no proof that they have more ships of the Behemoth's caliber. What if... They must have more, Orlan interrupted, his voice cold. No empire places its strongest asset on the front line without reinforcement. The fact that we haven't seen them only means one thing. Silence filled the war room. Finally, an Elvari officer spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. They're already here. The words hung in the air like a death sentence, because it was the only explanation that made sense. Humanity had revealed its battleship, but the true war was being fought in the shadows, deep inside Zith Dominion space. A Union-controlled refueling station floated in the darkness, supplying ships along the major trade routes. Its defenses were standard, enough to deter pirates, but not built to withstand a true assault. It didn't need to be. The Union was at peace. Or at least, that's what they thought. Unseen by every watchful eye, a human stealth ship hung in the void, completely silent. Its hull was coated in experimental materials that absorbed sensor waves, rendering it invisible to scans. It did not approach. It did not attack. It simply listened. Inside the vessel, Lieutenant Marcus Hall watched as streams of intercepted transmissions scrolled across his screen. Messages from Union warships, encrypted orders from military command, fleet deployments, supply routes. They weren't just gathering intelligence. They were rewriting the war before it began. A soft chime echoed through the bridge. The data extraction was complete. Hall turned to his team. "Send the package to Black Station. Let High Command know where to strike." The information surged through encrypted channels, traveling undetected through the vast galactic network. Within hours, Earth's top strategists would know the location of every major fuel depot, supply station, and weak point in the Union's infrastructure. By the time the Union fired its first shot, they would already be bleeding out. Back on the Behemoth, Admiral Hayes stood on the command deck, reading the latest intelligence reports from Ghost Fleet. His officers awaited his orders, but they already knew what was coming. "It's time," Hayes said, his voice calm. "Send the next message to the Union." Commander Carter nodded, transmitting a simple, untraceable signal across all Union channels, a message that needed no explanation. "We are already inside your walls." And with that, humanity's war had already begun. Panic spread like wildfire through the Galactic Union. The message, simple, chilling, had been broadcast across every secure military channel. "We are already inside your walls." No one knew where it came from. No transmission logs, no traceable source. It had simply appeared, as if humanity itself had whispered it into their ears. Chancellor Orland stood in his private chamber, staring at the words repeating on his holoscreen. His claws twitched in agitation. "What does this mean?" he demanded. A Union intelligence officer, his Elvari skin paler than usual, swallowed hard. "It means, Chancellor, they're already here." Orland's blood ran cold. "How? How could they have infiltrated us so quickly?" The officer shook his head. "We don't know. There have been no confirmed intrusions, no breaches in our security systems, no sign of human fleets inside our borders." And yet, the message was clear. The humans wanted them to know. Somewhere, somehow, they had slipped past the Union's defenses. They weren't attacking. They weren't negotiating. They were simply waiting. It was psychological warfare at its purest. The worst part? It was working. Aboard the Behemoth, Admiral Jonathan Hayes stood on the bridge, watching the incoming data streams from Ghost Fleet. Their silent incursions had gone undetected. Every major refueling station, supply line, and fleet deployment was now logged in Earth's war database. They knew everything. Commander Carter approached. "Union forces are scrambling. Their fleets are repositioning defensively, but it's chaotic. They don't know where we'll strike." Hayes nodded. "Good." "They're scared," Carter continued. "But fear only buys us time. Eventually they'll take action." Hayes glanced at the galactic map hovering before him. The Union's forces were spread thin. They had no central rallying point. No single command hub that could withstand a full-scale engagement. If war came, they would shatter like glass under a hammer. But that was not the plan. Not yet. "They'll come to us first," Hayes said. "That's the nature of frightened empires. They don't attack immediately. They probe. They test boundaries, send spies, maybe even a small fleet to gauge our response." Carter frowned. "You're suggesting they'll poke the bear?" "They don't think we're a bear, Commander," Hayes said with a small smirk. "They think we're a sleeping giant. They'll try to wound us first, see if we react." Carter's eyes darkened. "And when they do?" Hayes' voice was steel. "We won't react. We'll end them before they understand what's happening." He turned back to the display. "But first, we let them think they have control. Give them space to breathe. Let them believe they're making the right moves." Carter exhaled slowly. "We're playing the long game, then." Hayes nodded. "And when the time comes," his eyes gleamed like a predator waiting for the kill, "we take everything from them." The Galactic Union was unraveling. In the weeks following humanity's message, "We are already inside your walls," the once mighty alliance of empires had begun to fracture. Fear gripped their leaders. Paranoia spread like an infection. No one trusted their own security. No one knew where the humans were hiding, or if they had already infiltrated the highest levels of their governments. The worst part? There was no proof of any actual infiltration. No human agents had been caught. No data breaches had been detected. No sabotage had occurred. And yet they all believed it had. The Zith Dominion purged hundreds of suspected human spies, only to realize too late that they had executed their own intelligence officers. The Elvari Confederation imposed strict security measures, limiting interstellar travel and tightening border controls, suffocating their own economy in the process. The Union was tearing itself apart. And Admiral Jonathan Hayes watched it all unfold from the bridge of the behemoth. Inside the Elvari High Council chamber, Chancellor Orlan sat at the head of a long, gleaming table. His advisors gathered before him. The room was dimly lit, an unspoken acknowledgement of their desperation. The once proud leaders of the Union now whispered like hunted prey. "We must act," an Elvari general said. "We cannot live under the shadow of humanity forever." "Agreed," growled a Zith admiral, his mandibles twitching. "We strike now before they strike us." "Do we even know where to strike?" an intelligence officer countered. "For all we know, they want us to attack. They could be leading us into a trap." Orlan exhaled sharply. He had ruled over the Union for decades, but never had he felt this powerless. "They have made no official demands," he said. "They have not declared war. They have not expanded their borders. They have done nothing except wait." The silence in the room was suffocating. That was what terrified them the most. If the humans had invaded, the Union could have fought back. If they had made demands, negotiations could have begun. But humanity had done neither. They had simply existed, and the Union was losing because of it. Orlan clenched his fists. "We need to reclaim control of this situation. We will force humanity's hand." The Zith general leaned forward. "You mean provoke them?" "I mean test them," Orlan corrected. "Send a fleet to the Kepler defense line, a show of force, not an attack, just enough to see how the humans respond." "And if they respond with the behemoth?" someone asked. Orlan's expression was grim. "Then at least we'll know how they intend to play this war." Meanwhile, aboard the behemoth. "They're coming." Commander Elise Carter placed a datapad on the command table, showing the latest movement of Union forces. A fleet of nearly 200 warships had begun mobilizing toward the Kepler defense line. Admiral Hayes studied the data in silence. "They won't attack," he said finally. "Not yet. This is a test." Carter nodded. "They want to see if we'll back down." A slow smirk crossed Hayes's face. "Then let's teach them what happens when you test humanity." He turned to his officers. "Deploy Project Revenant. Let them see what they should be afraid of." Carter's eyes widened slightly. "Are you sure?" "We haven't revealed it yet." Hayes's voice was calm. "Certain. It's time the Union learned that the behemoth isn't the worst thing humanity has built." Hours later, at the Kepler defense line, the Union fleet arrived in formation, weapons powered but not armed, an unmistakable show of force. And then they saw it. A new ship, larger than anything the galaxy had ever known, a monstrous abyss-black warship, its hull absorbing light like a void in space. It made the behemoth look small. No records existed of its creation. No intelligence reports had ever mentioned its existence. It had never been seen before. The Union fleet, despite its numbers, hesitated. And then the ship spoke. "You are standing at the edge of your own destruction." The message rang across all channels, cold and emotionless. The Union fleet, once so confident in their show of force, found themselves staring into the unknown. And for the first time, they understood the truth. Humanity had never needed to fight them, because humanity had already won. The void of space had never felt so suffocating. The Union fleet, once assembled as a proud show of strength, now drifted in eerie silence before the monstrous warship that had appeared before them. No records, no intelligence reports, no prior warnings. This was something new, something the humans had chosen to reveal at this very moment. The ship had no name displayed on its hull, no insignia, no visible energy output, and yet its presence alone was crushing. You are standing at the edge of your own destruction. The voice was synthetic, almost lifeless, yet it carried a weight that pressed into the minds of every Union officer. The message had been received, loud and clear. Aboard the Union command ship Eternal Vigilance, Admiral Veltra of the Elvari Confederation swallowed hard. His fingers hovered over the comm panel, but he hesitated. He had been a soldier for decades, had fought wars against ruthless enemies, yet in this moment, he felt like an insect staring into the jaws of a predator. "Orders, Admiral?" one of his officers asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Veltra's mind raced. What was this thing before them? Another superweapon? A planet killer? The behemoth had already been terrifying, but this was something else entirely. And humanity had never mentioned it. They had kept this hidden. Until now. Veltra cleared his throat, forcing himself to regain composure. "Open a channel." A brief chime confirmed the link. "This is Admiral Veltra of the Galactic Union. Identify yourself." Silence. Then the ship's voice returned, its synthetic tone cold and unfeeling. "Your name is irrelevant. Your rank is meaningless. Your fleet is insufficient." Veltra's blood ran cold. This wasn't negotiation. This wasn't diplomacy. This was a warning. And it wasn't just directed at him. It was meant for everyone in the Union. Veltra's instincts screamed at him to retreat, to take his fleet and run. But he knew the consequences. If he backed down now, the Union would lose all credibility. Humanity had already demonstrated power beyond comprehension, but the moment the Union admitted defeat, they would become nothing more than vassals under Earth's shadow. He had no choice. "Hold position," Veltra ordered. "We are not here for war." Another moment of silence passed. Then the ship's voice returned. "Then you should leave." The command was not shouted. It was not accompanied by the charging of weapons or the movement of attack formations. It was simply stated as a fact, one that carried the weight of an unspoken threat. Veltra clenched his fists. He wanted to respond with defiance, to demand answers, to prove that the Union would not be cowed. But his sensors told a different story. There were no life signs aboard the warship, no heat signatures, no biological readings. This ship was not manned, which meant it was something else entirely, and the implications of that realization shook him to his core. Veltra's officers awaited his orders, tension thick in the air. He could push forward, demand negotiations, perhaps even order a test strike to gauge the ship's defenses. But deep down, he already knew how that would end. He took a slow breath. "We fall back." A ripple of disbelief spread through the command deck, but no one voiced their objections. No one wanted to stay here. The fleet adjusted course. One by one, the ships turned away from the Kepler defense line, retreating without another word. Aboard the nameless human warship, Admiral Jonathan Hayes watched the Union forces disappear from the sensor display. He allowed himself a small, satisfied smirk. "Phase 1 is complete," Commander Elise Carter said. "They took the bait." "They were never going to fight," Hayes said, folding his arms. "But now they know. Now they understand that the behemoth wasn't our greatest weapon. Carter nodded. What do we do next? Hayes turned his gaze back to the viewport, where the stars stretched infinitely before him. Now, he murmured. Now we let them realize that they've already lost. Inside the Union's War Council, Xeraxis Prime. The atmosphere was suffocating. High Chancellor Orlan sat at the head of the chamber, his expression unreadable as the footage from Veltra's fleet played on the central display. The warship had never fired, and yet the Union had retreated. They didn't even fight us, one of the council members whispered. They didn't need to. Orlan exhaled sharply. They're showing us the tip of the blade, making sure we see it before they decide to use it. The Union was at a crossroads. They could attempt diplomacy, but what bargaining power did they have? They could attempt to rally their forces, but how did one prepare for war against an enemy that had already won before the first battle? Orlan clenched his jaw. He would not surrender. He would not allow humanity to dominate the galaxy unchecked. But every instinct in his body told him the same thing. The Union's fate was no longer in their hands. It was in theirs. The Galactic Union had existed for over 1,000 years. It had withstood wars, economic collapses, rebellions, and external threats. It had bent but never broken. Until now. Humanity had done something no empire, no warlord, no species had ever accomplished. They had shattered the Union's will without ever firing a second shot. Across the galaxy, fear took root in every major power. The Elvari, once proud and unshakable, began withdrawing their fleets from contested regions, unwilling to risk provoking humanity further. The Zith Dominion, known for its ruthless expansion, suddenly halted its military campaigns, its warlords unsure whether humanity was watching them from the shadows. Trade routes collapsed. Diplomats scrambled to salvage alliances that were already crumbling. Whispers of surrender spread through high councils, and in the darkest corners of space, some even suggested the unthinkable, that the Union should submit to Earth before it was too late. And then, the final message arrived. It was not sent through official diplomatic channels. It was not delivered by an ambassador or through a subspace relay. It simply appeared on every planetary communication system, every military console, every leader's private terminal. The war was over before it began. You just didn't know it yet. Earth does not seek conquest. We do not need war. But if you ever lift a hand against us again, there will be nothing left of you. The Union's leaders, already crumbling under the weight of their own fear, knew what had to be done. One by one, the great empires of the galaxy quietly rescinded their war plans. Defensive fleets were recalled, skirmishes along human borders ceased, and the once proud Galactic Union, an alliance that had ruled for a millennium, was reduced to nothing more than fractured, obedient states. No treaty was ever signed, no formal surrender was ever issued, but the message was clear. Humanity did not rule the galaxy through force. They ruled through certainty. The certainty that if the Union ever dared to challenge them again, it would be the last mistake they ever made. As he watched the last of the Union's fleets withdraw from contested space, Admiral Jonathan Hayes allowed himself a rare moment of satisfaction. The war had never been about territory. It had never been about conquest. It had been about setting a precedent. Humanity had been underestimated for too long. That era was over. He turned to Commander Elise Carter. It's done. Carter nodded, exhaling. What happens now? Hayes smiled faintly. Now, we watch. And we wait. Because there would always be someone who forgot the lesson humanity had taught the galaxy today. And when they did, Earth would be there to remind them. The battlefield stretched across the void of space, a graveyard of shattered warships and drifting corpses. The remnants of the Coalition fleet, what was left of the once mighty alliance of alien species, fought desperately against the relentless forces of the Dominion. The Dominion had come from the outer reaches of the galaxy, an empire of cold, calculating conquerors who sought only subjugation or extermination. Humanity had not been part of the original war. The other species had ignored them, considering them a backwater civilization, too young to be of any real consequence. But now, as the Dominion's massive dreadnoughts loomed over the last strongholds of resistance, a new force arrived. The human warship Indomitable emerged from the darkness of space, its hull gleaming under the twin suns of the battlefield. It wasn't just a ship. It was a declaration. Humanity had come, and they were here to change the tide. For a moment, everything stopped. The Dominion's war machines hesitated, their artificial minds processing the sudden, unexpected arrival. The battered coalition forces, broken and scattered, could hardly believe their sensors. It wasn't just a ship. It was something monstrous, something impossible. The Indomitable wasn't like the sleek, organic designs of the alien fleets. It was a beast of steel, covered in battle scars, bristling with weapons that had no place in the delicate dances of interstellar warfare. Humanity had not mastered the energy-based weaponry of the galaxy. Instead, they had perfected something far more terrifying: kinetic devastation. The first shot from the Indomitable shattered a Dominion battlecruiser in an instant. It wasn't a pulse weapon, nor a particle beam. It was a mass driver slug moving so fast that shields barely registered its existence before impact. The enemy ship didn't explode in a blaze of fire. It simply ceased to exist, torn apart by sheer force. A second shot followed, then a third. The Dominion, for the first time in recorded history, hesitated. Their perfect, calculated conquest had never accounted for a species that would throw aside diplomacy and battle tactics in favor of sheer, overwhelming brutality. And then, humanity did what no one expected. They charged. The Indomitable surged forward, engines roaring as it closed the gap with the Dominion's command ship. The smaller vessels in its wake followed, human-made warships pushing deep into enemy lines with reckless abandon. The coalition forces, stunned but desperate, rallied behind them. The silent battlefield erupted into chaos once more. The Dominion's fleet scrambled to react, but they were not prepared for this kind of war. Their strategies had been honed over centuries, perfected against species that valued efficiency and precision. Humanity, however, was a different beast entirely. They did not fight with cold calculations. They fought with fury. The Indomitable barreled forward, its hull absorbing glancing blows from plasma lances and energy beams. Dominion gunners, trained to anticipate maneuverable, shield-reliant warships, found themselves helpless against the sheer mass and momentum of the human vessel. Inside the bridge, Admiral Ethan Graves stood firm, his fingers wrapped tightly around the railing as the ship trembled under enemy fire. His officers moved like a well-oiled machine, relaying damage reports, issuing firing solutions, and coordinating with the rest of the human fleet. "Status on the main railgun?" Graves barked. "Recharging, sir. Another 30 seconds." Graves watched as the Dominion fleet reorganized, their command ship falling back while smaller vessels rushed forward to form a defensive screen. They were trying to slow the Indomitable, to buy time for their flagship to escape. "Not today," Graves muttered. He turned to his tactical officer. "Target their formation with coilgun batteries. Shred them." A heartbeat later, the ship's secondary weapons came to life. Thousands of high-velocity projectiles ripped through the enemy ranks, tearing apart Dominion warships like paper. Unlike the delicate, energy-based weapons used by the rest of the galaxy, humanity's guns relied on raw kinetic force, slug after slug of tungsten and depleted uranium traveling at hypersonic speeds. Alien shields, designed to counter plasma and laser fire, proved nearly useless. Their hulls, built to withstand energy dispersal, crumpled under the relentless barrage. The battlefield became a graveyard. The Dominion's fleet, once an unstoppable force, wavered, and then the final blow came. "Railgun charged!" "Lock onto their command ship," Graves ordered. The targeting system locked onto the Dominion's flagship, a massive, crescent-shaped vessel twice the size of the Indomitable. It had been coordinating the entire invasion, a fortress among the stars. Now it was in humanity's sights. Fire, a single titanic slug, launched from the Indomitable's main railgun, traveling so fast it created a visible shockwave in the vacuum of space. The Dominion's command ship had shields, armor, and layers of defensive technology designed to counter energy-based threats. None of it mattered. The slug struck the vessel at its center, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then, the flagship split apart, torn in two by the sheer force of impact. A second later, its core detonated, sending a wave of fire and debris across the battlefield. Silence followed. And then, for the first time in history, the Dominion ran. The remaining enemy warships, once an unbreakable force, broke formation and fled. The unstoppable tide of conquest had been shattered. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Graves exhaled slowly. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. Humanity had made its entrance onto the galactic stage, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The silence that followed was eerie. The once chaotic battlefield, filled with the sounds of destruction and dying warships, had settled into an unnatural calm. Wreckage drifted in the void, twisted remains of Dominion vessels, shattered fragments of coalition ships, and the still-burning husks of those who had not been fortunate enough to survive. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Graves stood motionless, watching as the last remnants of the Dominion fleet disappeared into the abyss of space. The enemy had run. It was a sight that no one in the galaxy had ever witnessed. The Dominion had never retreated. Never once had they acknowledged defeat. Until now. A voice broke the silence. "Sir, incoming transmission from the Coalition fleet." Graves exhaled and nodded. "Put it through." The holo display flickered to life, revealing the image of an alien commander. His violet-hued skin was bruised, his military uniform torn, and his reptilian features bore the exhausted, desperate look of someone who had stared death in the face and lived. "This is General Koresh of the Zixan Republic," the alien said, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Human Admiral, we owe you our survival." Graves tilted his head slightly, studying the alien's expression. He had read the reports before the battle. The Coalition had dismissed humanity, had considered them irrelevant in the greater war. Now they were forced to see them as equals. "Don't thank us yet, General," Graves replied, his tone firm. "This was just one battle. The Dominion doesn't lose easily. They'll be back." Koresh's throat swelled slightly, the Zixan equivalent of a grimace. "Yes, but today they ran. They have never run before." Graves nodded. He had seen the moment when the Dominion's confidence had cracked, when their cold efficiency had failed against the sheer brutality of humanity's weapons. For centuries, the Dominion had waged war like a game of chess, moving pieces with precision, calculating every action. Humanity didn't play chess. Humanity flipped the board and set the table on fire. Another officer spoke up from the bridge. "Sir, picking up distress signals. Survivors from the battle." Graves straightened. "How many?" "Hundreds of ships, coalition vessels, escape pods, even some Dominion defectors." The Admiral's brow furrowed at that. "Defectors?" "Yes, sir. We're detecting a small group of Dominion vessels that powered down their weapons and are transmitting surrender signals." That was new. The Dominion didn't surrender either. Something had changed. Graves turned back to Koresh. "Looks like your war just took a turn." Koresh's expression darkened. "Perhaps. But the Dominion will never allow this humiliation to stand. They will return, and next time, they will not underestimate you." Graves smirked. Let them come. As the coalition forces began recovery operations, the Indomitable moved among the wreckage, gathering survivors and assessing the damage. Across the battlefield, the remaining human warships relayed messages to their command, transmitting the news across the stars. The Dominion had fled. Humanity had arrived. And the war was only beginning. The after-battle operations continued for hours. Human and coalition ships moved carefully through the wreckage, searching for survivors, salvaging what they could, and putting down any Dominion forces that still refused to surrender. It was a grim task, but necessary. The battlefield had to be secured before the Dominion could return in force. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Graves observed the tactical readouts. The ship had sustained damage, but nothing critical. Their weapon systems were already cycling for a full reload, and their engines had survived the battle with only minor strain. They were ready to fight again at a moment's notice. The holo display shimmered, revealing the stern face of Fleet Admiral Diana Voss, the highest-ranking officer in the United Terran Navy. Her silver hair was cut short, and her piercing eyes scanned Graves with the intensity of someone who had fought too many wars to tolerate nonsense. "Admiral Graves," she said without preamble, "we received your battle report. The entire Dominion fleet, routed?" Graves nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Their command ship is destroyed, and the surviving Dominion vessels retreated from the system. We've secured the battlefield and are recovering coalition survivors as we speak." Voss exhaled slowly. "I have to admit, I didn't expect them to run. The Dominion doesn't break formation. Ever." "They do now," Graves said simply. Voss studied him for a moment. "Word is already spreading. The other species in the galaxy are in shock. Some are celebrating, others are panicking. The Coalition is already requesting emergency meetings, and the Dominion, well, we don't know what they're planning yet." "They'll be back," Graves said without hesitation. "We wounded them, humiliated them. They'll want revenge." Voss nodded. "Agreed. That's why I'm issuing new orders." Graves straightened. "Orders, ma'am?" "The Dominion is going to retaliate, and when they do, they'll come in force. We can't wait for that to happen on their terms. The United Terran Navy is officially entering this war, and we are going on the offensive." Graves allowed himself a small smirk. "About damn time." Voss's expression remained grim. "You're to hold this sector and establish a forward base. More ships are en route to reinforce you, and we're preparing an expeditionary fleet to strike at Dominion-controlled space." Graves nodded. "Understood. We'll be ready." The Admiral leaned forward. "Graves, you just made history. The Dominion knows fear now. Let's make sure they never forget it." The transmission cut out. Graves turned back to his crew. The bridge was silent, everyone absorbing the weight of what had just happened. They had done more than win a battle today. They had changed the course of an entire war. "All right, people," Graves said, straightening his uniform. "You heard the Admiral. We're not just here to survive. We're here to win." Around him, his officers nodded, their faces set with determination. The Indomitable turned toward the wreckage-strewn battlefield, its weapons charging once more. This was just the beginning. Humanity had drawn blood. Now they were coming for the kill. The days following the battle were filled with ceaseless activity. The human fleet, along with what remained of the coalition forces, worked tirelessly to establish a forward operating base. Wreckage from the battlefield was repurposed into defensive platforms, automated turrets, and shield generators. Humanity wasn't just holding the line, they were digging in. The Dominion's retreat had sent shockwaves across the galaxy. The Coalition, a fractured alliance of alien species that had been on the verge of collapse, was suddenly looking to humanity for leadership. Some welcomed them as saviors. Others, more cautious, saw them as a new power rising from the ashes of war, one that might be just as dangerous as the Dominion. Admiral Graves sat in the command room of the Indomitable, studying a holographic projection of the sector. The war was far from over. The Dominion had lost one battle, but they controlled hundreds of systems. Humanity had sent a message, but the response would come soon enough. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the comms officer. "Sir, we have incoming vessels. 3 ships unidentified." Graves frowned. "Show me." The holographic display flickered, revealing 3 ships approaching from deep space. They were small, heavily damaged, and transmitting no weapons signatures. Not Dominion, not Coalition, something else. "Open a channel," Graves ordered. A moment later, a voice crackled through the speakers. It was weak, but unmistakably alien. "This is Commander Reltan of the Vicari Remnant. We seek asylum." Graves exchanged a glance with his officers. The Vicari were a name he recognized. Once a proud species, they had been among the first to fall when the Dominion began its conquest. It was believed they had been wiped out entirely. Yet here they were, alive and desperate. "Commander Reltan, this is Admiral Ethan Graves of the United Terran Navy," he replied. "You'll be safe here. Dock with our station. We'll provide medical assistance." The voice hesitated, then whispered, "You don't understand. The Dominion, they're not just retreating, they're regrouping, and they're coming back with something far worse." Graves stiffened. "Explain." There was silence for a moment. Then Reltan's voice returned, filled with dread. "They've awakened the Harbinger." A chill ran through the room. Graves had never heard that name before, but the way the alien spoke it, the sheer fear in his voice, was enough to send a clear message. The Dominion was about to strike back, and this time they weren't coming alone. Graves felt the weight of the words settle over the bridge like a suffocating fog. The Harbinger. It wasn't a name that appeared in any of humanity's war intelligence or intercepted Dominion communications. But the way Reltan had spoken it, with dread, with absolute terror, made one thing clear. Whatever it was bad. He turned to his officers. "Get that ship docked and secure. I want Reltan in the briefing room as soon as he's stable." "Aye, sir." Graves exhaled and ran a hand over his face. The Dominion had lost a battle, but he had never been foolish enough to believe they would simply retreat forever. He had expected them to return with a larger fleet, better tactics, maybe a new superweapon. But the way Reltan had spoken, this wasn't just about numbers or firepower. This was something else. An hour later, inside the Indomitable's war room, Reltan sat across from Graves. He was thin, his once regal Vicari uniform tattered and stained with dried blood. His 4 dark eyes, common among his species, darted around the room as if expecting something to strike him down at any moment. He was exhausted, haunted. Graves leaned forward. "Tell me everything." Reltan swallowed hard. "I was there when the Dominion took my world," he began, voice shaking. "We fought, we resisted, and they burned us to the ground. I watched my people die, our cities in flames, our warships falling from the sky. I watched them erase us." He paused, his eyes hollow. "And then I saw something worse." Graves remained silent, letting the alien speak. "The Dominion was searching for something. Not just conquest, not just war. They were looking for something buried deep beneath our planet's surface, something ancient." Graves frowned. "Ancient?" Reltan nodded. They found it. A structure, black as the void. A tomb, perhaps, or something worse. I do not know what lay inside, only that the moment they unearthed it, everything changed. He shuddered. The Dominion fleet stopped fighting us. Their ships ceased fire. Their commanders ignored our last attempts to surrender. Instead, they activated a massive excavation effort. They pulled something from the depths, and when they did, we heard it. Graves narrowed his eyes. Heard what? Reltan's voice dropped to a whisper. A voice. A sound that wasn't a sound. A whisper in our minds, cold and endless. It was ancient, older than the Dominion, older than any of us. It spoke to them, and they worshipped it. The room fell silent. Even the seasoned officers, men and women who had faced the horrors of war, seemed unsettled. Graves folded his arms. What happened after that? Reltan's breathing quickened. I don't know. I ran. What few of my people remained, we stole ships, fled into the darkness of space, but we saw something as we left. The Dominion began to change. His 4 eyes locked onto Graves, full of horror. They are no longer what they were. They are no longer just an empire. They are something else now. Something worse. Graves processed the words carefully. This wasn't just another military counterattack. This was something unnatural. Do you have any idea what the Harbinger is? He asked finally. Reltan hesitated. Then, barely above a whisper, he said, I do not know what it is. I only know what the old legends call it. He swallowed. The end that walks. Graves met the alien's gaze and saw something he did not expect. Hopelessness. But humanity did not believe in hopelessness. The Dominion had made one fatal mistake. They had shown fear, and fear was something humanity knew how to exploit. Graves rose from his seat, his expression hard. Then we stop it. Whatever this Harbinger is, we put it back in the ground. Reltan let out a dry, humorless laugh. You don't understand, human. If the Harbinger has awakened, there is no stopping it. Graves smirked. Then it's a good thing humanity doesn't believe in impossible fights. He turned to his officers. Prepare the fleet. We're not waiting for the Dominion's next move. The Indomitable was going to war. Again. And this time, they weren't just fighting an empire. They were fighting something far worse. The Indomitable moved through the void like a predator hunting in the dark. Behind it, the growing human fleet followed, warships newly arrived from Earth reinforcing the battle-hardened vanguard. Coalition ships, hesitant at first, had begun integrating into the formation. Some out of desperation. Others because, for the first time in history, the Dominion had shown fear. Admiral Graves stood on the bridge, watching the vastness of space stretch out before them. Their destination, the last known coordinates of the Vekari homeworld, now an abandoned graveyard under Dominion control. Reltan stood beside him, still visibly shaken. You are making a mistake. Graves didn't look at him. We've made worse. The Vekari survivor exhaled. You don't understand. The Harbinger isn't a weapon. It isn't something you can simply destroy. If it's awake, if the Dominion has truly become its servant, then the war you think you're fighting is already lost. Graves finally turned, his gaze hard. Humanity has a long history of winning wars we weren't supposed to. Reltan shook his head. Then you do not yet know what you are facing. The moment he spoke, the warning sirens blared. Multiple contacts on sensors, the tactical officer called out. They just appeared out of nowhere. Graves snapped his attention to the display. At first he thought it was an error. Then he saw the formations. Dominion warships, dozens of them, emerging from the void like phantoms. No jump signatures, no prior detection. Just there. A cold realization crept over him. They weren't hiding, he murmured. They were waiting. Reltan paled. You need to leave. Now. But it was already too late. The Dominion fleet did not hail them, did not posture, did not send demands. Instead, they moved in complete, terrifying silence. And then, the Dominion flagship, a massive, grotesquely reshaped version of its former design, transmitted a single message. A voice, hollow and wrong, seeped into the comms. It wasn't Dominion. It wasn't anything Graves had ever heard before. We see you, little ones. The crew stiffened as the voice slithered through the speakers, cold and ancient. It was not a voice meant for mortal ears. Your time is at an end. The void calls. Then, the enemy fleet opened fire. The bridge of the Indomitable erupted into chaos. Evasive maneuvers! Return fire! Graves barked, gripping the command railing as the ship shook from the first wave of incoming fire. The Dominion ships were different. Their sleek, methodical designs were gone. Now they were twisted, unnatural. Their hulls pulsed with a dark energy that shouldn't exist, their weapons striking with an erratic, almost organic intensity. It wasn't just war, it was hunger. The first of the human warships, the Dauntless, took a direct hit from one of the enemy's strange new weapons. Its shields collapsed instantly, and instead of the usual explosion, something else happened. Its hull withered. It was as if time itself had been drained from the metal, reducing it to a crumbling, rusted corpse of a ship in seconds. The crew barely had time to scream before it was gone. Graves clenched his jaw. "What in the hell are we fighting?" Reltan whispered, voice hollow. "The end that walks." But there was no time for fear. Graves turned to his officers. "New plan. We punch a hole straight through their line and get to the planet. If the Harbinger is there, we find it and kill it." The bridge was silent for a heartbeat. Then his tactical officer gave a sharp nod. "Aye, sir." The Indomitable surged forward, its massive railguns lighting up the void. Kinetic slugs, each the size of a dropship, tore through the Dominion vessels with relentless force. But for every ship they destroyed, more took its place. "Fleet is taking heavy losses." Graves set his jaw. "We press forward." As the Indomitable carved through the chaos, the planet finally came into view. And that was when they saw it. A monolith. It stretched across the entire surface of the Vicari homeworld, an impossible structure of black stone and pulsing veins of something alive. The Harbinger was no mere entity. It was becoming the planet itself. And it was waiting for them. The voice returned, filling the comms, the screens, the very air. "Come forward, little ones. We have waited so long for you." Graves exhaled sharply. Then he grinned. "Good," he muttered. "I hate being ignored." The Indomitable charged forward. The Indomitable roared toward the surface of the corrupted world, cutting through the Dominion fleet like a warhammer smashing glass. The remaining human warships followed, forming a desperate wedge through the enemy lines, kinetic slugs and missile barrages tearing apart the twisted alien vessels in their path. But the Dominion wasn't fighting like before. There was no strategy, no formation, only madness. Their ships moved erratically, jerking and twisting like puppets on invisible strings. Some ignored direct hits that should have obliterated them, continuing to fight even as their hulls were torn apart. Others turned on their own, ramming into fellow Dominion vessels in suicidal frenzy. Whatever the Harbinger had done to them, they were no longer a fleet. They were something else. On the Indomitable's bridge, Graves kept his focus locked on the looming planet. The monolith on its surface pulsed with a sickly crimson light, the stone shifting in unnatural ways. It wasn't just a structure. It was alive. "We need to land," Graves said. "Get me a strike team." Reltan's 4 eyes widened in horror. "You cannot set foot on that world. It is tainted." Graves glanced at him. "And if we don't stop it here, how long before it reaches another world? Earth? Your home?" Reltan hesitated. Then, with a slow, defeated nod, he said, "Then we go together." Minutes later, the Indomitable's hangar was a flurry of motion. Marines suited up, exo-rifles locking into place. Combat walkers stomped into deployment bays. The strike team assembled, their armor gleaming under the red emergency lights. Graves stood at the head of the team, helmet in one hand, pistol in the other. "Listen up," he said, voice carrying across the hangar. "We don't know what's waiting for us down there, but I'll tell you this. We didn't come all this way to back down now. The Dominion thought they could break us. The Harbinger thinks it's something to fear." He locked his helmet into place. "It's about to learn what we fear." The strike team moved into their dropships. The bay doors groaned open, revealing the hellscape below. The corrupted world pulsed with a sickly, blood-red glow, the surface shifting like something breathing beneath the stone. The dropships launched. As they descended, the atmosphere churned unnaturally. The clouds weren't right. They twisted and folded in on themselves, forming grotesque patterns that flickered in and out of existence. The ground below wasn't static. It moved, reshaping itself in unnatural spirals. Then the voices started. "We see you." The words seeped through their comms, not as a transmission, but as a whisper inside their own helmets. "You do not belong," one of the Marines flinched. "Sir, I'm hearing—" "Do not fight." The Marine shuddered violently, gripping his helmet. Then he screamed. Graves turned just in time to see the man crumble, his body withered, his armor rusting away, flesh turning to dust in seconds. The seat where he had been was empty, as if he had never existed at all. The squad fell into stunned silence. Then, before anyone could react, the dropships hit the ground. The world was wrong. Graves had seen war zones before. Cities reduced to rubble, planets turned to wastelands. But this wasn't destruction. It was corruption. The ground beneath their boots was neither stone nor metal. It pulsed like flesh, veins of red light glowing beneath its surface. Towers of blackened rock twisted toward the sky, shifting and groaning as if aware of their presence. The Dominion had built nothing here. There were no command centers, no war camps. The Harbinger was the world now. "Move," Graves ordered, stepping forward, rifle raised. The squad advanced, keeping tight formations as they pressed deeper into the cursed landscape. Then they saw them. Dominion soldiers, once proud, once disciplined, stood motionless in the distance. Their armor was fused to their flesh, their limbs elongated and bent at unnatural angles. Their eyes, once filled with the cold determination of conquerors, now burned with crimson light. They didn't move, didn't breathe. Then the whispers came again. "Join us." The Dominion soldiers turned their heads all at once, and then they charged. "Open fire!" The Marines unloaded into the oncoming horde, kinetic rounds punching through twisted flesh. But the Dominion warriors did not fall like normal soldiers. They kept coming, their bodies refusing to die even as bullets tore through them. Graves fired his pistol, the explosive rounds blasting apart a soldier's head, only for the body to keep running another 5 steps before finally collapsing. The squad's rifles blazed. Grenades tore through the nightmarish enemy ranks. But for every soldier they put down, 2 more emerged from the shifting terrain. "They don't stop," one of the Marines shouted. Graves gritted his teeth. "Then we don't either!" He led the charge forward, gunfire roaring into the darkness. They had one objective now: reach the monolith, find the Harbinger, and kill it, no matter what it was. The battle was chaos. The Dominion soldiers, once disciplined and precise, had become mindless husks of war, charging without tactics, without fear, without the possibility of retreat. They moved like puppets, their twisted forms lurching toward the human strike team with an unnatural hunger. Graves fought with brutal efficiency, his pistol blasting apart heads, his combat knife sinking into malformed flesh when they got too close. Around him, the Marines held their line, rifles spitting fire into the endless wave of bodies. But no matter how many they cut down, more rose from the shifting ground, as if the planet itself was birthing new horrors. "Keep moving!" Graves bellowed. "We push to the monolith!" The squad advanced through the madness, boots pounding against the pulsing, vein-covered terrain. The closer they got to the massive structure, the more reality itself seemed to bend. Shadows moved in ways they shouldn't. The air felt thick, pressing against them like unseen hands trying to smother their existence, and the whispers grew louder. "Futile, you are dust, you are nothing." A Marine suddenly stopped in his tracks. "Sir, His scream was cut short as his body twisted, his limbs snapping into grotesque new angles. His armor crumbled away as his flesh withered before their eyes. In seconds, he was gone. Just another corpse absorbed by the corrupted ground. The squad barely had time to process it before something massive rose from the earth ahead. A Dominion war machine, once a towering mech of steel and plasma, had been reshaped. Its plating was gone, replaced by blackened bone, its mechanical limbs fused with organic muscle. The pilot inside had long since become part of the thing, his twisted face stretched across its torso, screaming in endless agony. Then it lunged. "Take it down!" Graves and his squad unleashed everything they had. Grenades, rockets, full rifle magazines. It wasn't a fight, it was sheer desperation. The creature charged through the gunfire, its massive claws swiping at the Marines. It crushed one of them in an instant, armor splintering like glass. Graves rolled beneath its next strike, planting a thermite charge against its exposed muscle. "Clear out!" The Marines scattered as the charge detonated. Fire consumed the abomination, its body flailing as the flames ate through both flesh and corrupted metal. It let out a scream that wasn't just sound. It was felt inside their minds, vibrating through their skulls. Then, finally, it collapsed. The squad stood there, breathing hard, their weapons shaking in their hands. "Jesus," someone muttered. Graves didn't stop. He turned toward the monolith, looming just ahead. "We finished this." They reached the monolith's base moments later. Up close, it was even worse than it had appeared from orbit. The surface was smooth yet breathing, a shifting mass of black stone and pulsing veins. The structure stretched high into the sky, seemingly endless, disappearing into the darkness above. At its center, a doorway yawned open, a tunnel into oblivion. Graves turned to Reltan. "What's inside?" The Vicari's 4 eyes were filled with pure horror. "Nothing that should ever be woken." Graves clenched his jaw. "Then let's put it back to sleep." He stepped forward, leading the squad into the darkness. The whispers followed them in. "You are too late." And somewhere deep inside, something stirred. The inside of the monolith was worse than any battlefield Graves had ever stepped foot on. The walls weren't made of stone or metal, but something alive. The surface rippled as they passed, faint veins of crimson light pulsing beneath a slick, black texture that seemed to drink in the dim glow of their helmets' lights. The air was heavy, thick with something that wasn't quite mist, but clung to their skin like a parasite. The deeper they went, the wrongness grew. Shadows stretched unnaturally, twisting along the walls in ways that defied physics. Their footsteps didn't echo. They were swallowed by the silence, as if the monolith itself refused to acknowledge their existence, and the whispers, "You should not be here. You do not belong. You are nothing." Graves tightened his grip on his rifle, forcing the words from his mind. They were close. He could feel it. "Stay sharp," he muttered. The squad pressed forward, weapons raised. They were trained for war, for blood and fire. But this? This wasn't war. This was something else. Then they found it. A vast chamber stretched before them, impossibly large. The architecture defied logic. Corridors spiraling into places that didn't exist, walls folding in on themselves. And at the center, a throne. It was massive, forged from the same blackened material as the monolith, pulsing with veins of eerie red light. It was both ancient and alive. And sitting atop it was the Harbinger. It was neither dominion nor anything else that should exist. Its form was humanoid yet wrong, twisted, elongated, draped in shifting black tendrils that moved as if whispering to each other. Its eyes, if they could be called that, were two burning voids of infinite darkness, peering into them, through them. It was waiting. Graves felt the weight of its gaze, a pressure inside his skull, not painful, but oppressive, as if his very existence was being measured. Then, for the first time, it spoke, not in whispers, not in malice, but in something far worse. Amusement. Ah, humanity. Its voice was deep, smooth, ancient beyond measure. It rumbled through their bones, resonating in the very molecules of their flesh. "You are persistent." Graves took a slow step forward, raising his weapon. "And you are in our way." The Harbinger tilted its head slightly. Then it laughed, a deep, unsettling sound, rich with something far worse than madness. "In your way?" It echoed. "No, child. You do not understand. I am not here to conquer." It leaned forward on its throne, the tendrils around it writhing. "I am here to watch." Graves didn't hesitate. "Light it up." The squad unleashed everything. Rifles, grenades, energy bursts, everything they had. The throne room became a storm of fire and destruction. The Harbinger vanished in the chaos, swallowed by the sheer force of humanity's wrath. For a brief, fleeting second, Graves allowed himself to believe it had worked. Then the dust settled. The Harbinger was still there, unharmed, unbothered, still smiling. Oh, how delightful. It rose from its throne, standing at its full height, its presence suffocating. The chamber around them trembled, the very monolith pulsing as if in anticipation. "Now, let me show you what it means to fight a god." The world collapsed. And the screaming began. The chamber erupted into a nightmare beyond comprehension. The Harbinger's form unraveled, not into flesh or metal, but into something incomprehensible, a mass of writhing darkness that swallowed light itself. The air twisted, reality buckling under its presence as tendrils lashed out, impossibly fast, impossibly everywhere. Graves barely had time to shout an order before the first Marine was taken. A tendril pierced through armor and flesh alike, lifting the soldier into the air. His scream was cut short as his body dissolved, not into blood or ash, but into nothingness, erased as if he had never existed. "Fall back!" Graves roared, firing his rifle into the swirling abyss where the Harbinger had stood. Bullets vanished into the void, useless against something that didn't obey the laws of matter. The squad scrambled, but the monolith itself turned against them. The walls pulsed and shifted, sealing the doorway behind them. The ground beneath their feet churned, splitting open to reveal jagged maws lined with teeth made of shadow. Another Marine vanished into one, his cries silenced instantly. Reltan grabbed Graves's arm, his 4 eyes wild with terror. "We cannot fight this! It is beyond—" Graves yanked free, his voice a growl. "We don't run!" The Harbinger's laughter echoed through the chamber, deep and omnipresent, shaking their bones. "Run! Oh no, little ones, there is no running. There is only me." The darkness surged forward, a tidal wave of annihilation. Graves saw 2 more of his squad vanish, one torn apart by tendrils, another simply gone, as if the Harbinger had unmade him with a thought. The squad's firepower, humanity's brutal defiance, meant nothing here. But Graves didn't stop. He pulled a plasma grenade from his belt, primed it, and hurled it into the heart of the storm. The explosion lit up the chamber in blinding white, briefly pushing back the darkness. The Harbinger's laughter faltered, just for a moment. That was enough. Graves turned to the last of his team, 3 Marines and Reltan. "We're not killing it," he said, voice steady despite the chaos. "But we can bury it." He pointed to the chamber's ceiling, where cracks had begun to form from the grenade's blast. "Overload your weapons. Bring this place down." The Marines didn't hesitate. They set their rifles to self-destruct, piling them at the base of the throne alongside every explosive they had left. Reltan, trembling but resolute, added his own Vicari plasma charge to the mix. The Harbinger's voice returned, no longer amused. "You think this will stop me?" Graves met its burning gaze as he set the final timer. But it'll slow you down." The darkness lunged. The explosives detonated. The chamber collapsed in a cataclysm of fire and stone. The monolith shuddered, its unnatural architecture crumbling inward as the blast tore through its core. The Harbinger's scream, a sound no mortal mind could fully grasp, echoed as the ceiling came down, burying the throne and its occupant beneath tons of corrupted rubble. Graves didn't see if it worked. The shockwave hurled him and the survivors backward, through the collapsing tunnel, out into the open air of the cursed world. They hit the ground hard, rolling across the pulsing terrain as the monolith imploded behind them. The red veins beneath the surface flickered, then dimmed. The whispers stopped. For a moment there was silence. Graves pushed himself to his feet, blood dripping from a gash on his forehead. Beside him, Reltan and the 2 remaining Marines struggled upright, staring at the ruin of the monolith. "Is it dead?" one of the Marines asked, voice shaking. Graves wiped the blood from his face, his eyes locked on the rubble. "No," he said quietly, "but it's trapped. For now." Reltan's voice was hollow. "It will rise again. It always does." Graves turned to him, his jaw set. "Then we'll be ready." Above, the Indomitable broke through the corrupted atmosphere, its engines roaring as it descended to extract them. The Dominion fleet, or what was left of it, had scattered, fleeing in disarray without their god to guide them. The dropship touched down, and the survivors boarded in silence. As they lifted off, Graves looked back at the ruined world below. The monolith was gone, reduced to a smoking crater, but he knew this wasn't the end. The Harbinger wasn't a foe they could kill with guns or bombs. It was something older, something eternal. Humanity had wounded it, defied it, but it would return. And when it did, they'd fight it again. Because that's what humanity did. They didn't kneel, they didn't break, they fought. The Indomitable rose into orbit, the remnants of the human fleet rallying around it. The war with the Dominion wasn't over. The Harbinger's shadow still loomed. But for now, humanity had won, and the galaxy would never forget it. Think harder. Explain the Harbinger ancient galactic threats